elsewhere. There's also the diplomatic component has to be included in the assessment of the opposition and Israeli citizens.
A very good point. It was a question I was going to bring to Dalia anyway. Let's talk about international public opinion. There, again, it's that word again, disconnect between how Jewish Israelis are thinking about the war against Iran and, for example, American Jews are thinking about the war against Iran. Is Israel losing considerable support from the international Jewish community because of Netanyahu's policies over the years? And that's just been compounded now by the war in Iran.
Yes, to a large extent, that's true. But I just want to go back very quickly before I answer that and express one more voice in Israel from the opposition that we have not mentioned, and that is the opposition parties led by Ayman Odeh, who has been openly opposed to the war. And I think we should put that out there because it's not entirely accurate to say that no opposition voice has expressed any criticism or questions about this war. Really, political discourse, we only think of the Jewish or Zionist upper. In terms of public opinion and the dissonant, yes, absolutely. What's interesting is that American Jews have had a net negative attitude towards Netanyahu for some years now, even before the general American public turned against Netanyahu, and that's because they were following much more closely when Netanyahu. It really started during the first Trump administration, when Netanyahu, well, actually, I should say even it really started in the late Obama years, when after Netanyahu came to Congress, went around the back of the American president, that began a process of less favorable support from American Jews. And that process continued of less favorable support from American Jews. And that process continued. And so now I think there's a perception among American Jews that Netanyahu makes the state of Israel into a place that looks bad and maybe is bad, something they can't relate to. I shouldn't say bad entirely, because I think most American Jews still feel very strongly, pro-Israel on some level. But the criticism of what the government is doing is very powerful. And I think that they tend to focus all of that blame on Netanyahu. And that's why he has already lost American Jews over time.
Right.
In terms of just already against starting a war in Iran, under what Trump has done. Now, the fact is that Republican voters does support the war, certainly after it started, which I think, against some of the, but the public so far, Republican voters, at least as they're expressing themselves in surveys, have shown quite a strong consensus in favor of what Trump is doing because they're so loyal to Trump. We talk about majority opinion being against it. First of all, that is evening out somewhat in polls in the U.S. in the second week of the war, but also I think Trump primarily is interested in his base to begin with. So
the mention of Ayman Odeh, he was a Palestinian Israeli member of the Knesset, a very serious.
Oh no, he definitely does. I was shaking my head because I think our average viewer, the Arab vote in Israel, although it should constitute 20% in the Knesset, it is represented by 10%, even less than that. In opposition to this, Mr. Netanyahu, for many years, has been making a compelling intellectual case about Iran. You can disagree. Opposition has never met the challenge. They never.
Criticisms coming from the international Jewish community against pretty much Netanyahu himself. But that doesn't seem to have any impact on his popularity at home. Why is that?
Jews, the majority of them are solidly behind this. There are Israeli policies that are not popular with them. There are those that are more to the left of center that are not so comfortable. But when it comes to support for Israel at the end of the day, I think that, we have that Jewish community shelters. We were in the bomb shelters in Jerusalem already twice today. We're dealing with this. So it's nice for anyone, whether they're citizens anywhere in the world of any religion, to be against this war. But you know what? Netanyahu has been crying wolf now with the Islamic Republic of Iran for probably 10 years solid. And you know what? Now's the time to kill the wolf. And that's what he's doing. And so everyone here is behind that. And it doesn't matter what criticism there is, and it doesn't matter who's against. And even if we lose support among, political friends in the United States and elsewhere, at the end, most of us here believe it's an existential threat, because the Iranians have been saying for many years that they want to wipe out Israel and that one day Israel will not exist and Israel has no right to exist. So that's fine. Right now, the Israel is doing the job to get rid of that. So it doesn't really matter what anyone says.
But you have to, Mitchell, you have to think about, the idea that there is a root cause of all of this. Iran wouldn't be Iran if the occupation wasn't taking place. If the occupation of the Palestinians was as brutal as possible, I mean, you can laugh, but you get rid of the occupation.
Is that really their main? I know that the PLO was founded in 1964, before the occupation, so that Palestinians can return to Jaffa and Jerusalem and Ramla and all these other places. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not concerned with the Palestinian issue. That's not why they support terror all over the world, because of the occupation. Really?
Right, Mitchell.
I mean, that's they're against the United States also.
You've made your point beautifully, but I do want to come to our other guests as well.
The last month in Britain, there were 10 attacks carried out by them. It doesn't have to do with the Palestinians. It's great that you're now saying we caused the Iranian regime to want to annihilate.
I mean, the occupation is a big part of it. I mean, Alan wants to jump in here. Just 1 second. 1 second, Mitchell. Come on.
Well, I'm not here to argue with Mitchell, but I know where he's coming from. This self-right issues, but on 10%, he reverts back to going, oh no, this is not about the occupation. Oh no, the PLO was formed in 1964. That's before occupation. Yes, Mr. Balak, but it's after what the Palestinians consider as Nakba, which I'm okay with, but you need to recognize that they don't think it's okay. And as for the Iran existential threat, stop using it as if this is 1938 Nazi Germany, like your mentor, Mr. Netanyahu, does, because it is not. It is a sign of weakness. You're forgetting how strong we are. You look at what we're doing militarily in Iran, and you have evidence, proof, an irrefutable demonstration of how strong we are. Yet you still play the victim. They're out to get us. They're out to destroy
Alan,
us.
I'm going to stop you there because we are running out of time.
All this to circumvent the Palestinian issue. Let's be honest about this.
Okay. And I want to bring in Dalia here. Listen, Dalia, I want to give you the kind of street level opinions that I kept hearing when I was based in, which was Netanyahu needs a forever war just to keep him in power, that this is the be all and end all of that. And that was coming from, the streets of Tel Aviv. It was coming from the streets of West Jerusalem. So it was an Israeli opinion. You have any sympathy with the argument?
Do I have personal sympathy with the argument? In other words, do I support it? Do I think it's correct? I mean, I think we have to get away from a lot of these kind of very, sorry to say this because I really respect all of my colleagues here, but I think that there's, so much of Israeli discussions about politics, becomes very reductionist. And let's just admit that this is a lot more complex and some of this is multi-causal. Netanyahu truly believes that the Iranian regime needs to be restrained and that it can only happen militarily. He truly believes that. I think that the threat that it can annihilate Israel is completely overblown, and yet there is a threat. I think the biggest thing Netanyahu has brought to this is the idea that it can only happen militarily. Is he saying that purely in order to stay in power? No, he truly believes it. Does he want to stay in power at all costs? Absolutely. Is Iran exploiting the Palestinian cause for its own mobilization so that it can expand its power, or what it sees as build its strategic depth through its proxy? I believe that Iran's aggressive posture in the Middle East over all of these years is purely because of the occupation. That would be completely reductionist. And yet the occupation is a very significant mobilizing factor, I think, in anger at Israel around the Middle East that helps it rally support for its proxy networks over the years. All of these things are true. And I do think that Netanyahu, of course, wants to stay in power. And this is also a primary ideology that he has. That the main thing is that Israelis have been very broadly convinced over all of these years that there is no other option, that Iran will always try to destroy Israel, and that there is no such thing as, there was a nuclear agreement called the JCPOA, and it was working. Okay, was it perfect? There are no perfect solutions, but it was working. Iran was in compliance. There were international inspectors, and uranium enrichment remained at 3%. Ever since President Trump and the deal, the situation has become immeasurably worse. Iran took a much more aggressive posture, enabling and trying to build up its proxy to be stronger and more emboldened, accelerated the ballistic missile program, and accelerated uranium enrichment. And so I fail to see why in all of this complexity,
Dalia, we are running out of time.
Aren't focusing on another possibility.
We are running out of time. I want to come to both Alan and Mitchell Brock for a very quick answer, because we are running out of time. This idea that Netanyahu wants to, he got to be damaging for Israeli democracy.
Look, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone really wants ongoing war, and certainly not after the last 2.5 years that we've experienced. What I think we're missing here, this is not about staying in power for Netanyahu. Whether he wins the next election, retires, wins, and then leaves, this is going to be his legacy. I mean, think about the last 2.5, 3 years. We had the worst defeat on October 7th.
Sorry, Mitchell, I'm going to leave it there at legacy, because that's quite important. That's quite
This is how we will remember Netanyahu, how the Middle East has changed.
Alan, very
better, we think.
Alan, very quickly, do you think he needs a war to stay in power?
Yes. You said quickly. Yes.
Certainly a solid answer. I want to thank all our guests. Alan Pinkhurst, Dalia Schneidlin, and Mitchell Brock. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Imran Khan, and the whole team here, thanks for watching. Stay tuned now for more of Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the war.
That would precipitate an attack against American forces.
To prevent Iran from getting nukes.
There is no coherent strategy, and you can see that's reflected in the media coverage.
Many American media see it like a video game. From the graphics on the screen to who they speak to, war for them is big business.
We saw this exact same pattern happen in Gaza. Same lazy, flattened reporting that we saw in Gaza when it comes to the war on Iran.
The Listening Post decodes the media on Al Jazeera.
I'm Folie Batibo. I'm a presenter. I've always wanted to be a journalist because I'm a very inquisitive person. And a pivotal moment was when I did an internship. That's when I realized that we, as journalists, make a difference in people's lives. And here at Al Jazeera, we try to make a difference. We make sure their stories are told and their voices are heard.
Al Jazeera, wherever you are.
in the next 60 minutes. Israel says it's killed 2 high-ranking Iranian officials, the security chief and the commander of the besieged internal force. Iran launches more strikes on central Israel and carries further attacks across the Gulf region. Drone attacks target the US embassy in the Iraqi capital. We're live from Baghdad. The counterterrorism official resigns, accusing Israel of dragging Washington into war when it did not pose an imminent threat.
And live from Washington, D.C., we bring you This is America, digging into what endgame scenarios look like for the U.S. to finish the war with Iran.
So then it's been more than 2 weeks since Israel and the United States launched their attacks on Iran, a move that's thrown the Middle East and global markets into chaos. And there appears to be no end game in sight. Just a few hours ago, Israel said it killed Iran's top security official, that's Ali Larijani, during an attack on the capital of Tehran. And since the war began, Larijani has been a central figure in the leadership structure, second only to the supreme leader. Israel also says it's assassinated Golem Reza Soleimani, the commander of the internal security force known as the Besieged. There's been no comment yet from Iran on either of the reported killings, but Israel's prime minister says their deaths will pave the way for regime change.
We are undermining this all at once. It will not happen easily, but if we persist, we will give them the opportunity to take their fate into their own hands.
US President Donald Trump has welcomed the strike, saying Iran's leadership has been decapitated.
Their actual top was killed yesterday. Their leaders are gone. I guess one of their top person was, they say, a lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing, the man that for the killing of 32,000 people over the last 2 weeks. He was in charge of the killing of protesters. It's an evil group. I mean, they've killed much more than 32,000 people. And the man who was responsible for that also killed yesterday.
So we have correspondents watching developments for us from Baghdad, from Ramallah, from the White House, and from Tehran, which is where we're going to start with Ali Hashim in the Iranian capital. So Ali, still no confirmation from the Iranians of the killing of Larijani and Soleimani.
Well, today we had an exclusive interview with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and when we asked him about the killing of Larijani, he said he heard the news just like others, but he has no confirmation. However, he stressed that his system, the Islamic Republic, is a well-established system that is institutional and isn't built upon individuals. Gave an example with the assassination of the supreme leader, and that even with the assassination of the supreme leader, nothing has affected the build of the system. He even said that even if he is killed, many others are killed among officials. That is not going to impact the system. However, there are, of course, reasons why, till the moment, we don't have an official narrative over what happened to immediately after the announcement by the Israelis that he was killed. The Iranian news sites a statement by Larijani, and it was a statement about the issue of the killing of several Iranian Navy members in India. I can hear now the voices of interceptors. It seems that there's something in the sky. There are interceptors activated, and earlier when we were in the city, city center, the interceptors were also activated. We saw several drones in the sky, and it seems it's the same case here, whereas there might be several drones in the sky around here.
Ali, thanks for that, Ali. Hashem there in Tehran. Let's go to the White House. Mike Hanna is standing by. Hierarchy. What is the administration saying about this killing?
Well, President Trump appeared to confirm reports that Larijani had been killed, too, that Israel says that it killed as this guy and the other guy, which is deeply strange because Larijani has been utterly central to negotiations, direct and indirect, between the US and Iran over a vast period of time. He was the absolute center of the negotiations, even with this earlier said that there is no one to negotiate with because all the senior leaders have been killed. It would appear that Larijani is now one of those with whom the administration could have or would have negotiated should it have wanted to, and should Iran have wanted to discuss a way to end the conflict. And also, importantly, it must be noted that Larijani came to the Supreme. So, in effect, the US played a major role in putting into power with complete control over Iranian defense and nuclear development into the one man who knows the US better than any other Iranian.
And of course, Mike, here in the United States itself, we've got resignation of the first senior Trump administration official, Joe Kent. What's being said about that?
Well, President Trump was largely dismissive of this move by a very senior figure. Joe Kent is not your average bureaucrat. He's a special forces operative with decades of experience in the field. He has been in theaters of war. He knows what he's talking, particularly because he phrases it as Israel having beguiled Trump into entering this war, the Israeli lobby having created an echo chamber providing Trump with false information, which led to his intervention and his decision to go to war. So the other point about Joe Kent is that he's a strong MAGA supporter. He's a fervent admirer of Donald Trump. He now falls into the category of those within the MAGA movement who are deeply concerned about President Trump's declaration of war, not only because of the fact that President Trump said, unlike his predecessors, he would never put his soldiers in harm's way on foreign soil. Well, that's exactly what he is doing, and that's exactly what Joe Kent has pointed out in his resignation letter.
All right, that's a picture from the White House. Mike Hanna reporting. Let's shift focus to Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Noor O'Day is standing by for us there. And Noor, so what are Israeli officials saying about this? How the killings of Larijani framed?
Well, they're being framed as a victory, Nick. The Israeli Prime Minister has said that Israel has an opportunity, a historic opportunity to achieve what it wants, and that is basically to end the Islamic Republic of Iran, not just to assassinate its most senior leaders. Of course, Larijani himself had been described in Israeli commentary over the past week or so as the most dangerous mind in Iran, and that tells you a lot because Israel understood Larijani would be critical if a deal is to be reached to end this war, and that is not the scenario that the Israeli Prime Minister and his government are looking for. They're looking to maximize benefit to serve that end goal of ending the Islamic Republic in the window that is provided to them by the U.S. president. They are afraid of anything that might expedite Trump's decision to end the war, and hence that assassination, framed as a victory, comes in that context politically.
Meanwhile, Noor, the strikes continue in both directions. Indeed, a barrage of rockets have been fired into Israel from southern Lebanon. The launch following, Nora, an Israeli airstrike on a building south of Beirut earlier on Tuesday. Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah sites in a renewed bombing campaign that's killed at least 900 people and has displaced more than 1 million people. No casualties have been reported so far. Let's hear from Nora again. So what more are you hearing, Nora, about the these latest attacks?
Well, Israel has been attacked by Iranian missiles and now by Hezbollah rockets. And interestingly, Nick, we heard from the Israeli army earlier in the afternoon warning the residents of northern communities that they saw movement and that they expected a very large barrage of rockets coming from Hezbollah. Now, this is important because last week a similar incident happened and the army denied having knowledge of such movement, and they were blamed because Hezbollah fired almost 200 rockets and there was a lot of damage caused in those northern communities where anger keeps telling them that even if the war in Iran would last another month, the war on Hezbollah in Lebanon will outlast that by many months.
No, thanks for that, Nora Day, there in Ramallah. Well, several explosions have rocked Iraq's capital of Baghdad near the US embassy. The building was reportedly the target of drone strikes on Tuesday. On Monday, a drone strike hit a prominent hotel near the embassy in Baghdad's Green Zone. Asad Beg joins us live now from Baghdad. Yes, Asad, we had those strikes 24 hours ago, just a little less than 24 hours ago. What more can you tell us about the latest strikes that are coming in?
Well, the latest is that there's been a sharp escalation in drone and aerial activity, not just here in Baghdad, but across Iraq, as this conflict continues to spill over into Iraq. Now, you were talking about Baghdad. We've had drone activity here in Baghdad's Green Zone, where the US embassy is located tonight. And we understand that 2 drones are intercepted, whilst a third disappeared off radar. The anti-aircraft, the SRAM system that you've heard of before, that detects drones or aerial objects and tries to shoot them down, has been very active tonight. In fact, we were standing where I am right now, and we saw the anti-aircraft go up and then a series of loud explosions. Now, we understand that some debris has fallen across the capital here in the area of Al-Dura. Shrapnel fell on a university compound, causing damage to windows, and injuries have been reported. And in Al-Jadariya, near the central bank, we understand a fire has broken out where debris from an aerial object, authorities say, has fallen near the main gates, causing a fire. And there's still more information coming in about that. But it's not just the capital Baghdad. Across Iraq, we're hearing also in Erbil, the Iranian Kurdish opposition headquarters has been targeted by drones. We're hearing in Anbar province, the US has carried out airstrikes against a tribal meeting, and also near Mosul, there's been debris that's fallen on agricultural land in other parts of the country. We've heard that roads have been closed because drones have been taken down and because of airstrikes. Now, what this really shows is that there is this constant threat. There's really no let-up, whilst Iraqi security forces are also trying to neutralize those threats. But the real question is, some of these drones are being launched from within Baghdad, and that raises serious security questions.
Asad, thank you. Asad Beg there, reporting from Baghdad. Well, while all these latest developments are taking place, the Pentagon is sending more warships and troops to the Middle East. That's according to US media reports. The amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli is now heading to the region along with Marines. It was stationed in Japan. The deployment is meant to reinforce US troops already in the Middle East. The build-up follows a request from US Central Command, which oversees American military operations in the region. The head of the International Maritime Organization says that naval escorts through the Strait of Hormuz will not 100% guarantee the safety of ships attempting to transit the critical waterway. Arsenio Dominguez, Secretary General of the UN Maritime Agency, told the Financial Times that military assistance was not a long-term or sustainable solution to open up the strait. The IMO chief adds it reduces the risk, but the risk is still there. The merchant ships and seafarers can be affected. He says that ships are collateral damage of a conflict when the root causes have nothing to do with shipping. Tehran oil and gas supply chain disruptions are impacting a long list of commodities used across many industries. Kulsum Sharif explains.
Days into the US-Israeli war on Iran, now the conflict is driving up far more than just oil prices, and that's because Iran has effectively shut the Strait of Hormuz, a critical transit route for oil and gas supplies. It's also virtually stopped shipping traffic, and that's affecting commodities like aluminium. Now, the Gulf region accounts for about 8% of global supply, 30% of Europe's imports, and 20% cost and vast energy resources have helped the countries here set up huge smelting factories, but they rely on raw material imports. And this choke point here is not letting that happen because those shipments are also getting stuck here. So now this is driving up aluminum prices, and it's the highest it's been in years. Now, nearly a third of the is sourced from Qatar's Ras Laffan hub. Now, helium is a byproduct of liquefied natural gas, and Qatar, as we know, is a major exporter, but it stopped production after Iranian attacks on its facility. Now, remember, if there's no LNG, there's no helium. The gas supports several industries in the semiconductor, medical imaging, and aerospace. Now, the Gulf also produces sulfur and urea. Now, sulfur is used in fertilizer processes and several other industries. Nearly half of the world's supply normally passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And when it comes to urea, the region is a major producer, but it needs to pass through this choke point to get to its buyers. Now, the disruption can have an impact on agricultural output, and that in turn is going to have impact on food prices, and they're likely to go up. And finally, we have Brazil, the world's largest sugarcane producer. And mills here can either produce sugar or ethanol, which is fuel used for cars in the country.
Israeli military spokesman is speaking now. Let's have a listen in.
At the beginning of the operation, Larijani was succeeded to him, and he was also a bloody leader and who also conducted oppression and killings, actions against his own people. We have also killed Ghulam Reza Soleimani and many other leaders. Soleimani supervised and was the head of the bases and also led several terror operations against their own people. His hands are stained with blood of many of the Iranians who were killed recently. We are continuing to kill all those who work in Basij so that they won't have any place or site where they can work. We will continue until we kill the last one of them. The leader of the Basij was for the Iranians, and for the regime was the oppression phase. And everything that we did was to kill those who sacrificed their lives to destroy the state of Israel. They were running and they're hiding, however.
Okay, that's the Israeli military spokesman talking there of the killing of Ali Larijani, Iran's top security official, and Ghulam Reza Soleimani, the commander of the Internal Security Force. Now let's speak to Ross Harrison, who's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C., and author of the new book, Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy, and also Sultan Al-Khulufi. We welcome a senior researcher at the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. Gents, welcome. So these two killings, Sultan, first of all, if we may, key figures in Iran. Larijani, well known internationally. Let's talk about him first of all. Central to negotiations over the years. How do you think his reported killings, it still hasn't been confirmed by the Iranians, although the Israelis are confirming it, and Trump, as we've said, has also done so. How does it affect things moving forwards now?
I think what we have seen right now is that the Israeli strategy is still continuing in terms of decapitating the regime figureheads. But until now, at least seeing the major trends in the regime is still resilient, and it's an institutional regime compared to Iraq, compared to Afghanistan. So the killing of one person does not mean that there is no replacement. For me, to see it is that what's the end game? What's after Larijani? Larijani was an effective power broker, but his replacement will continue his work. Of course, there will be some glitches, but still he will be there. So I don't see where is the end game for the Israelis.
Sultan, the Israelis say change now. Do you agree with that?
Usually regime change happens when three things happen together. The regime is fragile and does not have a capacity to serve the people. The second thing is that the coercive potential of the regime is lost. So we didn't see any cities lost yet to the opposition. And the third thing, supported opposition is effective on the ground. We saw that they tried a gamble with the Kurds, and the Kurds have not fallen into that gamble. So I don't see how regime change will happen at this stage.
Ross, do you think it changes the shape of things on the ground within Iran?
Well, it certainly changes the shape of things in terms of the leadership. I mean, there have been two key determinative leaders that have been taken out over the last number of years. One was 2020 under Donald Trump. The first term was the killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds Force. And that clearly brought us to where we are today. And the killing of Ali Larijani and Ali Khamenei certainly is going to be a shaper of the events coming in the next number of days, number of weeks. I think the question becomes, where does the system will regenerate leadership? The question is, where does it take us? Johnny, Ali Khamenei, they developed their careers in the crucible of war. The revolution first, and then the Iran-Iraq war. The new generation of leaders coming through these institutions do not have that experience. And so they potentially could be more reckless, more nationalistic, even though they're part of an Islamic regime, more nationalistic, and potentially more dangerous. So what the Israelis have tried to do, which is to basically end this regime and decapitate the regime, could in fact lead to a regeneration of leadership that is less pragmatic and less careful and less calculating and less nuanced than what they just took down.
Okay. And Sultan, in the short term, do you think it impacts any potential off-ramp that existed through Larijani?
I think in the short term, it will just mean that the regime will try to hit harder to make sure that in front of its own audience, that the regime is still capable of defending itself. But I think in the medium term, at least if the war lasts for another month or two, there is a potential for an off-ramp. Potential for an off-ramp if Asian countries come together with the Gulf, talking to both the US and to the Iranians, trying to find an off-ramp. It doesn't need to be public, but needs to be making sure that these two countries know that other players have leverage and that they are getting effect for a ceasefire.
To push for a ceasefire. And Ross, the direction of this war at the moment and how it's the direction of travel, how does that affect the options that Iran has? So what do you think it is doing as far as the
12-day war? When they agreed to a ceasefire and then acted in a measured way, in a calibrated way, rather than a maximal, that brought them to where we are today. So I think the killings of today, I think, are going to push back any kind of possibility for a diplomatic off-ramp, because I think the Iranians, the only way the Iranians are going to follow any kind of a diplomatic pathway is if they believe that they can, number one, survive, but also that they can recreate deterrence. And this clearly is an indication that they can't, not only can they not deter the United States and Israel kinetically or militarily, they can't even deter them in terms of their the Iranian security leadership. So I think it really sets us back in terms of any possible diplomatic off-ramp at this point.
And Sultan, how do you think Gulf states will be observing these latest developments? Because the attacks are continuing out of Iran. We felt them right here in the studio here in Doha and Qatar. Gulf states showing big restraint right now. Might it change?
I think the Iranian attacks are just serving the Israeli interests, because one Israeli objective is that if they bring the Arabs into the war, that will actually move the attacks from Israel to the Gulf and to other Arab countries. So there is no interest for the Gulf to intervene into the war right now. The proper actions to stay neutral, of course, the attacks are just unjustifiable, because the Gulf has helped Iran a lot in terms of trying to find an off-ramp before the war, but also historically. So the Gulf states, I believe for now, are seeking to stay neutral to avoid bigger turmoil in the war.
But do you think Iran sees that it has any other option other than to do what it's doing right now, which is to try and hit Israel and hit the region too?
I think that just alludes to the problem that Ross has talked about, is that the regime, when it's decentralized and the new elements are coming in, they do not have the connection with the Arabs that Qasem Soleimani and Ali Larijani have. So there is a potential that new elements are going to be more radical in their approaches.
Ross, do you want to bring focus to the United States and this resignation of Joe Kent, and not your ordinary Trump appointee, his opinion very important and a wholehearted MAGA supporter, right?
Yes, I mean, but I think the name is not a household name in the United States. Sure. So if you're asking the question of will this lead to some kind of pressure on the president to end this conflict, I'm not so sure, because you would need someone much higher profile, I think, in terms of the known in the living rooms of the United States, like a Hegseth or Rubio, for it to have any kind of impact, if at all. I mean, Trump has a way of revising history. When somebody quits or he fires them, he immediately disses them and says they were coddling
but does it reveal any potential greater dissent within the administration?
Possible. Within the administration, I don't think so. Because remember, this...
Or on the fringes, at least.
That many fringes in the administration. The problem with this administration is that the decision-making apparatus has contracted to a few individuals. We saw that during the negotiations between Iran and the United States in Geneva. A few cronies of the president. So all of the institutional knowledge that would be a dissenting voice have been marginalized. So I don't think so. Possibly, but I don't think so.
All right, leave it there for the moment, gents. Do appreciate that. Ross and Sultan Khalefi here in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Well, now Israeli forces are continuing to strike southern Lebanon. This is the aftermath of an attack on Arab al-Jal, which is a village near the coastal town of Sidon. The area is home to roughly 500,000 people and has endured Israeli bombardment for more than 2 weeks now. The Israeli military has continued issuing forced displacement orders to residents of southern Lebanon. The Lebanese government says more than 1 million people have been displaced. About 300,000 of them are children, according to the United Nations Children's Fund. UNICEF says more than 100 miners have been killed and more than 300 wounded across Lebanon since March the 2nd. And Syrian authorities say about 80 area. Sena Hoda has this report now from South Lebanon.
There's been another Israeli strike. This is really very much an active war zone. Both sides really fighting for control of territory. We are in the eastern sector of southern Lebanon. What you see, this is the village of Khiam, really strategic ground that the Israeli military has been trying to take control of. Days of fierce fighting in this area. The Israeli military has been targeting roads, airstrikes. It's part of a strategy to disrupt Hezbollah's supply lines. It does not want Hezbollah to bring in weapons and fighters to areas closer to the border as the Israeli military tries to advance deeper inside Lebanon. Dibin is considered to be an area where Hezbollah has strong influence. There have been repeated Israeli strikes targeting that town, which is believed to be empty of residents. The Israeli military is advancing from more than one sector, and Hezbollah is trying to repel those advances. Hezbollah saying that it is targeting troops inside Lebanese territory while firing rockets across the border. They've even said that they been hitting Israeli Merkava tanks. So Hezbollah trying to prevent the Israeli military from taking ground, and the Israeli military, advancing under the cover of heavy power, Israeli airstrikes, artillery fire. The battle is still taking shape along the border, but it is here where the balance of power will be determined. Zana Khudr, Al Jazeera, South Lebanon.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. And Israel's defense minister says that Iran's security chief Ali Larijani has been killed in a strike. Iranian state media have released a statement from Larijani's social media on Tuesday. The Israeli military says Gholam Reza Soleimani, the commander of Iran's internal security unit, has been killed. The director of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center has resigned over the war with Iran. In a resignation letter posted on X, Joe Kent accused Israel of dragging Washington into the war, saying Iran did not pose an imminent threat to the U.S. It is the first high-profile resignation. Let's go live now to Washington, D.C. for our regular segment from the U.S. Capitol, bringing you deeper insight into the debate shaping America and the world. Let's go to Anna and Phil for This is America.
This is Al Jazeera, and this is America. And a lot of questions in America right now. Questions for President Trump about the end game in this conflict. What does it look like? Does it keep on changing? But also allies. We're going to be looking at that more in detail in a few minutes. But first, Anna Burns-Francis.
Thanks, Phil. In a moment, we'll be joined by our colleague Mike Hanna, who is at the White House for us today. Why is the United States in a war with Iran? And more importantly, how will it get out of a war with Iran? America launched its assault on Iran in the midst of protracted diplomatic talks. The reasons why included preventing the development of nuclear weapons, a call for regime change after recent civil unrest, and eliminating an imminent threat to the United States. The messaging has been shifting and contradictory. Trump has said the war will be over when he feels it in his bones. Anytime I want it to end, he said on March 11, it will end. And just a couple of days ago, the president said the war was over.
And we've won. Let me say, won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
Now, clearly, the war is not over. But the president continues to make statements about when and how it will be. Let's go now to the White House, where Mike Hanna is standing by. And Mike, the president has spoken in just the last couple of hours, again saying that the operation in Iran is just a military one and that it is mostly over. But is he calling it an end to this conflict?
Well, it's not clear exactly what he is calling it, because he sent out different messages at different times, as have members of his administration. The time frame for this war has ranged from 3 or 4 days at the beginning to 4 weeks or more from other administration officials. So there's no clarity, and there is no clarity as to exactly what the mission objective is. And unless this is understood, it's very difficult to see how the U.S. can create an off-ramp to start backing away from this conflict. Well, let's just try and sort out this apparent confusion.
Are you ready to officially declare victory?
How long is a piece of string? This question perhaps an answer to whether there's a time frame in this war. Last week, the president appeared to be heralding the beginning of the end.
Every place we've gone, we've had tremendous success. But while we're doing all of these things, we're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete.
The president was asked to clarify whether it was complete or whether, as his defense secretary said, it's just the beginning.
I think you could say it both. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of building a new country.
That's a phrase that set alarm bells ringing in Congress. Even Trump supporters like House Speaker Mike Johnson and many of his fellow Republicans insisted the U.S. should not get involved in nation building in Iran.
That is something that history should have made clear. Attempts at nation building ended badly in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Wars that President Trump said should never have been launched, while pledging that he would never put U.S. lives at risk in other countries.
It is still the case that the Trump administration cannot explain the reasons that we entered this war, the goals
of mission accomplished may once again be empty words.
Thank you.
Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, both the White House obvious. But were they? Let's head to Phil Lavelle in the newsroom to see how the US media is interpreting it.
Yeah, a lot of coverage in the press and on TV about how the rhetoric appears to be contradictory. So let's take a look at how Axios is reporting this. Axios is really not pulling any punches here. Look at this headline. Trump's Iran war messaging is all more fluid. Right, let's go to the Washington Post next, and it leans into that endgame scenario or lack of it. Its headline here, Trump pursues Iranian decapitation without a plan for what comes next. And it delivers a scathing assessment. Look at this, regime change by jazz improvisation. Remember, regime change, 2 words we heard a lot at the beginning, and it goes on. Sadly, it is the most accurate description of the scattered, shifting, and uncertain approach that emanates from Washington these days. But let's move over to TV. This is PBS, and it was asking what went through Donald Trump's mind, what went through Pete Hegseth's mind. Here's how they covered it on the NewsHour.
Every intelligence agency on earth seems to have concluded that the odds of regime change, the odds that the Iranian people have any opportunity to rise up anytime soon, are very unlikely. And so that means we're in a war of containment. It looks a little more like the Cold War, where whatever happens in this military kinetic phase, there's going to be a long period we're going to have to contain Iran.
Right, next up, we're going to go to Fox News. This is Brian Kilmeade. He's one of Fox's big hosts. Now, remember at the start of this, Donald Trump was urging Iranians to take back control of their country. He said it might be their only chance in a generation. The president was talking to Kilmeade.
That it'll happen, but it probably will be maybe not immediately. Who's going to do that? They literally have people in the streets with machine guns, machine gunning people down if they want to protest, okay?
And finally, the Los Angeles Times. It says Trump may not know what he wants or why he started this war. And it goes even further. It asks, is there a way out of this conflict? And its final assessment, here we go. Trump remains confident of victory. It would be nice if he clarified what victory means. And remember, the president has talked about how he feels this war is very much complete, but the bombs are still falling. And there are so many questions about the end game and what that looks like.
Plenty of confusion then, at least amongst media, about the rationale for the war. Here to hopefully make some sense of it is Jason Campbell, a former Pentagon official now with the Middle East Institute, and Charles Kupchan from the Council of Foreign Relations. He used to advise President Obama on the National Security Council. Jason, I'll start with you. How does Donald Trump's messaging confuse any path people may see toward the end of the war?
Well, I think in the mixed messaging is trying to allow him maximum flexibility, but it's also causing confusion because the stated goals are military, but there are inherent political desires there that aren't being explicitly stated, but certainly insinuated over and over again.
If there has been an off-ramp so far, and I speak to perhaps the death of Iran's supreme leader, and again reports out of Israel most recently that the chief security officer Ali Larijani has been killed. Are those useful paths for Donald Trump to claim a win and exit this conflict?
Well, the problem is it takes two to tango, it takes two to step back. And so Trump can't unilaterally declare victory and walk away because he needs to get the straits open. He needs the Iranians to stop firing missiles at American partners in the Gulf. And so I do think that one key issue right now is when will the Iranians, much more punishment are they going to take? And I do think that they're both edging toward that off-ramp. We're not there yet. Let's keep a close eye on when the Iranians are ready to seriously talk about stopping this war.
I wanted to ask you about this because it is becoming a case of endurance, isn't it? And Iran has given every indication that not only will it have a say in what becomes the end of the war, but at this stage, it's prepared to keep going indefinitely.
You know, there is an asymmetrical element to this, in that the Americans are pounding away at the missile launch sites, the drone factories, the command and control centers, but the Iranians have an ace, right? And that is, this is a very narrow strait. It's shallow. You can't start an escort mission while this war is going on. And so I do think that the Iranians have the not all the leverage, but the key here is to continue to put the pressure on the regime so that they're ready to say, we've had enough, at the same time that Trump says, we've had enough.
They've got enough leverage, right, in the meantime. Jason, I'll bring you in here because surely all of the things that we're discussing are also being discussed at other, much higher levels, certainly amongst President Trump and his advisors. We have seen the boss of America's counterterrorism center today, Joe Kent, has resigned. He's quit in protest at where things are going. What is happening inside those briefings? What are those discussions that military and administration bosses will be having with the president about coming to an end?
Well, it appears right now that part of the issue is that most of these discussions center around military solutions. That remains the top of Trump's rhetoric. He's trying now to build coalitions of really anyone who will offer some sort of assistance to effectively retake the Strait of Hormuz, however that might play out. And there's not a lot of discussion now of what are the political ramifications, either of moving forward with proposing talks or what some sort of a ceasefire scenario might look like.
But politically, it has to look like a win, doesn't
it? To see how they get there as long as Iran is able to control the Strait of Hormuz.
It would seem that based on air power alone, as it largely is at the moment, this is not necessarily a conflict that militarily is going to achieve the objectives that we keep hearing about?
I think that's absolutely the case. If they've already decapitated the regime, they're still going after high-profile targets. That absolutely does degrade their ability to lead to just with air power.
Yeah, we have seen President Trump's cabinet is sticking with the line that he is ultimately the one who decides how the war proceeds and what those objectives are. Here's what the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had to say just a few days ago.
We define success, again, 12 days in, 13 days in, by reaching the military objectives that we've laid out. Launchers, missile launchers, defense industrial base, their Navy, the ability to project power at a nuclear weapon. And we've got internal metrics that look at that we represent to the president, who then can decide how long he'd like to continue in pursuit of those military objectives. So that hasn't changed.
All right, Charles, quick fire here. Will the United States achieve a regime change or neutralizing any nuclear capability here?
One of the advantages of mixed messaging is you can change the narrative as you go along, and that's exactly what's happening. And Trump will declare victory when he thinks he's degraded the missile capability, when he's taken out the ability of Iran to enrich uranium, which is pretty much already done, and when he Iranians to stop supporting proxies.
Right. There will be a great number of people asking, though, how did you get into a war without at least a clear plan of how you might get out of the war? How did this get into this situation?
You know, I don't think the Trump administration did its homework. I think they looked at what happened in Venezuela. They looked at the strikes that had been taken in Iran last year, other surgical strikes in Iraq, in Syria, and Yemen, and they thought that they could do this cleanly and surgically. And that didn't happen. The Iranian regime has shown remarkable resilience. They were more ready for this war than the United States was. And that's why I think now Trump is recalibrating and saying we're about to end this war. I think we are, but he needs to convince the Iranians to play along.
Can we pick up on that point about Iran being ready for this war? There's been a lot of commentary about people saying that Iran has prepared for this moment. And President Trump was asked specifically about the briefings he had, whether anyone anticipated and warned him that Iran would retaliate in this way. He said nobody had seen this coming. What do you make of that comment, Jason?
I think it's a little disingenuous, having sat in on a number of war games, tabletop exercises over the years. When you look at, again, Iran is a master of asymmetric warfare. The Strait of Hormuz is, for them, a geographic that they can use in asymmetric ways, as we're seeing. They've got a range of missiles and drones that can reach throughout the region, and a whole lot of U.S. interests based in there that they've struck, as I think anyone would have rightfully expected.
Yeah, Charles, you just mentioned just before that regime change looks like it's going to be off the table. So what then would Iran look like acceptable to President Trump to call an end to this?
Yeah, I think regime change for now is off the table. I think there was a flirtation with arming the Kurds and trying to break up the country. I don't think that's going to happen. 60% Persian, the Azeris are very close to the Persians. That looks to me like a winning coalition. I think the key question is, do we end up with the Islamic Republic that was there before, controlled by hardliners, or do we end up with the Islamic Republic 2.0, more moderate, less ideological, willing to work with the United States on creating some sort of stable status quo? Those are the two options.
Your two options might dictate your answer to my next question. We wrap things up here. When do you see an end to the war, Charles? Give me a timeline that you have in your mind.
I think we're probably looking at another couple of weeks before oil prices are so high, Iran has been hit so much that they're ready to say, hey, let's call it quits.
Jason, any predictions from you?
I think I'm in general agreement. I think the strategic loss for the U.S. is to have the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz remaining largely in the hands of Iran in terms of who can come in and out. That has to be resolved.
Jason Campbell, former Pentagon official with the Middle East Institute, and Charles Kupchan from the Council of Foreign Relations, thank you both so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, that ever-moving narrative about objectives and endgame for the United States and Iran has also played out online. Alex Baird has been following the developments on social media.
Well, as you've heard throughout the show, Trump's messaging on the war with Iran has been a moving target. His hardline stance 1 week in, unconditional surrender, while saying he wanted to make Iran great again. A week later, he was claiming on Truth Social to have won the war. The United States of America has beaten and completely decimated Iran, both militarily, economically, and in every other way. But then a while of days later, it pushed this video. One mission, clear objectives, stopping Iran from having nuclear weapons. The war clearly still in play, and that ever-evolving narrative around the end game, with conservative podcaster Tucker Carlson, who says he's never met anybody who has laid out a logical case for this war and how it will benefit the states. That line has been seized on by Democrats. California Governor Gavin Newsom saying there is no real end game in sight, despite surging gas prices and the extended range of Iranian attacks. And for Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, if there's no end game, and if chaos in the region could go on indefinitely, there's one question. What's next?
Well, that's all for now from Washington, D.C. On This Is America, we'll keep following the decisions that shape the U.S. and influence the world. And now, back to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.
Okay, let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines. The British Prime Minister has assured Ukraine's president the focus will remain on Kyiv's war efforts against Russia, even as the conflict in Iran unfolds. Keir Starmer and President Volodymyr Zelensky, they've been discussing security partnerships at 10 Downing Street, and they've agreed to collaborate on defense strategies to tackle drone attacks. Now, Ukraine has become one of the world's leading producers of battle-tested drone interceptors. Zelensky addressed members of the British Parliament, and he says Ukrainian teams are in several Gulf countries to assist with fighting off Iranian drone strikes.
There are 201 Ukrainian and Gulf region, and another 34 are ready to deploy. These are military experts who know how to help, how to defend against Shahid drones. Our teams are already in the Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and on the way to Kuwait. We are working with several other countries. Agreements are already in place. We do not want this terror
is gradually being restored to hospitals and some of Cuba's 11 million residents following the country's third blackout within 4 months. Large parts of the island are without power as the aging national electricity grid collapsed again. The US has imposed an energy blockade after Donald Trump warned of tariffs on any country that sells or provides oil to Cuba. Washington is calling for new leadership in Cuba, with Trump saying in the last few hours that Cuba right now is in very bad shape.
We are too spoiled. boiling 3 pieces of chicken to try and save something to eat because the situation is really bad.
The power outages are driving me crazy. Look, I fell down a 27-step staircase. Now I have to have surgery on my jaw.
More injured in a series of blasts in the northeastern city of Maiduguri. At least 3 suicide bombers detonated devices at a market and hospital on Monday. It's the latest in a string of attacks in Borno State, carried out by armed groups Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province. Ahmed Idris has more now.
In a week that saw the killings of dozens of security forces and local militia, situations underline the intention of the attackers to inflict as much harm as they can.
From what I personally saw with my own, they could not bear to do so. But there were many dead, and the number of injured people was even higher.
Shortly after, another bomber detonated his device.
Later, we learned that the other explosion near the post office was also caused by a man carrying a bomb.
The Boko Haram and ISIL in West Africa have stepped up their attacks during the fasting month of Ramadan. In the past 2 weeks, they have launched daring attacks against the military positions in Borno State, killing security personnel, including senior officers. The presence of American troops in Nigeria has failed to stop the attacks. Before the latest flare-up, Maiduguri had witnessed a long period of calm, raising hopes that the city may have been insulated from attacks. Officials have called for calm and vigilance, but the latest violence in the region has jarred nerves that is slowly rebuilding from 16 years of violence. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Abuja.
Afghan officials say that a Pakistani airstrike on Kabul has killed at least 400 people, many of them patients at a drug treatment center. Pakistan says the statement is false and misleading, saying it had precisely targeted military installations. It is the latest. Robert Bride has this report now.
The aftermath of a devastating attack on a medical facility in the Afghan capital, Kabul, part of the ongoing conflict with neighboring Pakistan. Dormitories housing hundreds of patients undergoing drug addiction treatment were destroyed in the explosions and subsequent fires. Relatives of those being treated have been anxiously waiting for news of loved ones.
Of God.
Witnesses say 2 bombs were dropped just after evening prayers on Monday.
I found out that this area was bombed in the airstrike last night. I can neither find my nephew alive nor his dead body.
Footage released by Pakistan shows what province of Nangarhar. Islamabad has denied Afghanistan's claim it hit a civilian facility and says secondary explosions are evidence of ammunition depots from under the rubble. Scores of survivors are now being treated in hospitals.
In the second explosion, I got some without hands and arms.
I was in rehab for 2 months. My mum had written an application to the hospital and I was due to go home with her today.
This strike marks another escalation of the conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan that had already intensified in recent months. Rob McBride, Al Jazeera.
The Palestinian Authority is facing a deep financial crisis that could affect its ability to pay salaries in March. With the conflict in the Middle East, many warn that the Palestinian economy could take an additional hit. Nida Ibrahim explains the reasons behind this financial crisis.
The Palestinian Authority has been in debt for years. Now officials are warning this is not a financial crisis, but an existing.
But rather to the withholding and theft of our funds by Israel. This is the 10th month in a row that we've not received a single penny of our money held by Israel.
This is the Palestinian finance minister, and he's saying that the government was barely able to scrape together enough for 60% of public sector workers' salaries in February. In March, even this may be impossible. Classrooms across the occupied West Bank are mostly vacant. Public schools have cut teaching hours to 3 days a week as a stopgap measure. And teachers are among the worst affected, but so are many other sectors. The PA employs 100, and because the market depends on these salaries, when this cash flow dries up, it chokes the economy. A major part of this crisis comes down to one thing: money that Israel collects on behalf of the Palestinians and refuses to hand over. Let me explain. Because of Israel's military occupation, the Palestinian Authority has no effective control over its borders. So under a 1994 agreement called the Paris Protocol, Israel became the tax collector on its behalf. How does that work? Goods come through Israeli ports or Israeli-controlled crossings, and Israeli authorities collect customs and duties. The deal is simple. Israel deducts a handling fee, then transfers the rest of the funds to the PA every month. This money makes up around 60% of the PA's revenues. It's vital for its survival, vital for the economy itself. But since 2019, Israel has been freezing or subtracting amounts from these transfers. To date, it's withheld $4.5 billion. And the excuses vary. The main one, the PA gets money to families of Palestinians imprisoned or killed after attacks against Israel. But the financial pressure does not stop there. Palestinians who used to work in Israel are being heavily restricted. The checkpoints are further hindering businesses, and international aid is declining. And because money is politics, Palestinian officials say the cash crunch is a sign of a bigger problem. They fear Israel is working to dismantle the PA, or in their opinion, worse, replace it with a technocratic committee similar to the one recently established in Gaza. 30 years ago, the Palestinian Authority was created as a foundation towards a state, towards sovereignty and independence. The fear now, this ambition is being buried. In the end, it's an authority collapsing in slow motion, and the public economy is just one aspect of it.
We are going to take a short break now. Plenty of the latest developments in the Middle East and indeed in as the war enters a third week very shortly at the top of the hour. See you in a bit.
As the war on Iran escalates, Al Jazeera's correspondents on the ground.
This is the first time that President Trump has spoken publicly live.
We project 4 to 5 weeks.
All the while insisting that the United States has plenty of weapons left.
We have only just begun.
Still, he's not ruling out sending U.S. troops into Iran.
We expect to take additional losses.
Today we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action.
That is a price Americans say they do not want repeated.
Stay with Al Jazeera for the latest developments.
In-depth analysis of the day's headlines.
Diplomacy.
The table. Who attacked the negotiations for the second time? For the Israel, not Iran.
Iran has been a huge supporter of terrorism over the years. I really have to take exception to the idea that Iran is innocent in this.
Inside Story on Al Jazeera.
of the US and Israeli attacks on Iran. I'm Nick Clark. Coming up, Iran's president confirms the killing of the country's commander of the besieged internal force, but no confirmation yet of the assassination of security chief Ali Larijani. Iran launches more strikes on central Israel. Yes, drone attacks target the US embassy.
Realize that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat.
The top US counterterrorism official resigns, accusing Israel of dragging Washington. So it has been more than 2 weeks since Israel and the United States launched their attacks on Iran, a move endgame in sight. Israel has said it killed Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, during an attack on the capital, Tehran. Since the war began, Larijani has been a central figure in the leadership structure, second only to the supreme leader. There's been no comment yet of Ghulam Reza Soleimani has taken place, the commander of the internal security force known as a Basij. Israel's prime minister says the killings will pave the way for regime change.
We are undermining this regime in the hope of giving the Iranian people an opportunity to remove it. This will not happen all at once. It will not happen easily, but if we persist, we will give them the opportunity to take their fate into their own hands.
US President Donald Trump, he's welcomed the strike, saying Iran.
The top person was, they say, a lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing. The man that was responsible for protesters. It's an evil group. I mean, they've killed much more than 32,000 people. And the man who was responsible for that was also killed yesterday.
So we have correspondents watching developments for us from Baghdad, from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So, Ali, state TV are reporting the confirmation of Soleimani's death from the besieged forces, but still none on the killing of Larijani.
Of Larijani's killing. This is due to probably till the moment they are in the process of confirming this incident. Of course, on the other side, the confirmation of the killing of the Basij commander was made on TV. The foreign minister, in an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera today, was the first official to react to the news. Now, regardless of him not confirming and saying that he heard the news just like others, Abbas Araghchi stressed that this is a system built on institutions, the system, and he said that the most important person was the leader, and the leader was killed, and that did not really shake the system. Abbas Araghchi, in his interview with Al Jazeera, mentioned several issues related to the war, the relation with the Gulf, also President. Besides, he also spoke about the possibilities of the end of this war and how Iran visualized the end game.
Okay, let's bring in Mike Hanna at the White House. So, Mike, Larijani, a key political player in the Iranian hierarchy and indeed a well-known international figure. What's the administration saying about his apparent killing?
Well, President Trump made reference to the fact that he apparently believed with the reports of Larijani's death. However, interestingly enough, he did not refer to him by name. He referred to this guy and the other guy when speaking about the whom Israel claims that they've killed, to negotiations, direct and indirect, with the US for a lengthy period of time. I'm talking about decades. He was the foremost negotiator with the US, dealing with nuclear issues in particular. And also, interestingly enough, it was that US and Israeli attack on June last year that led to Larijani being made head of the national security, and also, so in effect, the US has now lost the one person with whom it has had regular contact over many, many years, and this may create its own. It wants to negotiate with someone to get an exit ramp to this war.
All right, back to Tehran, to Ali Hashim. And Ali, Reza Soleimani, the Basij commander, also killed, was responsible for internal security. Have there been any reports of reinforcement of checkpoints or any kind of change of tactics at all?
Well, we have to clarify here. He is not responsible for the internal security. He's part of the armed forces, the Basij, but they are volunteers. So he is not directly involved in the internal security. This is what the internal security does, which is the Ministry of Interior does, which the other forces will do. However, their own job is different here. It's a complementary job to the job of the IRGC, while the IRGC is the military arm that defends the revolution in the narrative of the Islamic Republic. The Basij are the ones who defend the revolution inside, and this means if there are protests, if there are any kind of unrest within the country, then we will see the Basij. Now, regarding your question, yes, there were several checkpoints in this city, but these are also related to other threats that were already there, according to the official media. There was anticipation of unrest in the cities, so we saw this situation of, let me say, more and more checkpoints around Tehran.
Now, the US director of the National Counterterrorism Center has resigned, saying he cannot in good conscience support the Trump administration's war on Iran. Joseph Kent posted his resignation on social media, saying that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. He adds that he was confirmed to the role by the Senate last July. Well, speaking at a press briefing alongside the Irish Prime Minister, Donald Trump criticized Joe Kent's resignation.
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it.
Well, this was no ordinary administration official resigning. He is a special forces operator in the past with vast experience in a number of theaters of combat. So he knows what the situation is for soldiers on the ground in foreign countries. And this is one of the reasons that he gave for in his resignation letter, referring to his wife, Shannon, who was also a special forces operative who was killed in a suicide bomb attack in Syria, saying that he does not want other families to feel the sadness that he felt when his wife was killed in combat in a war by Israel, and that the Israel lobby within Washington, D.C. provided an echo chamber, providing also President Trump with false information to take this decision to go to war. But it is a very important fact as well that Joe Kent is a fervent supporter of President Trump. He was a fervent supporter of MAGA, And there are other people within MAGA who have expressed the same reservations that Joe Kent has just done about President Trump's decision to go to war, leading to putting soldiers into harm's way in foreign countries, which the president said he would never do.
Mike, thanks for that. Mike Hanna there at Washington, D.C. at the White House. Let's cross to Nora Day in Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So, Nora, what are Israeli on the death of Soleimani?
Well, Israel is adamant that it was able to successfully assassinate both Larijani and the head of the Basij, and it is framing this as a victory. The Israeli Prime Minister to topple the Islamic Republic of Iran, not just the leadership that is now in power. Netanyahu wants the whole system gone. He says that these assassinations will encourage Iranians to take to the streets, even though his own security establishment finds the collapse of the government, of the system in power, to be highly unlikely. Now, this is basically important for Netanyahu's purposes, because he's not gaining in the polls, Nick, and he's eyeing elections in November. These kinds of wins under his belt, so to speak, just prop up his chances with his right-wing base, and so he will continue to capitalize on it, vowing to assassinate whoever he can, whoever intelligence provides an opportunity to assassinate, whether it's in Iran or...
Let's speak now to Marwan Bashar, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. Marwan, good to see you there. So first of all, what do you make of these reported killings? First up, Ali Larijani, well known internationally, a key figure at home. How does it change the shape of things?
You know, after the killing of many before him, that the system in Iran is strong, and the killing of one leader is not going to lead to the implosion of the system. It's yet another leader that will be replaced by yet another, and perhaps the next one will be even more radical than this one, albeit not as experienced, because as we've also been hearing, again, lived through the revolution since the beginning, and a new generation of leaders will take over that don't have that kind of memory, the memory of the early days of the revolution, the Iraq-Iran war, and so on and so forth. That's true to a large extent. And yet, I would say the following. Quantitative changes lead to the erosion of the regime. Now, on the other hand, the fact that Israel is turning this into an industry of an assassination is something we need to pay attention to, because this is not the norm in wars. In wars, you don't start by killing political leaders, including elected leaders. Not the norm of war.
And Marwan, what does it tell us about both these assassinations? So, as I say, the Larijani death hasn't been confirmed yet, but Gholam Reza Soleimani has. Sowing chaos within Iran and indeed across the region. But as far as Iran is concerned, with the idea, they say, of opening the door to regime change.
Yeah, it's quite cynical. I mean, it's very cynical in the sense that publicly they over the system, kick out the regime, right? But in private and in consultations with the Americans, now we know, it's been reported in the American media, in the Israeli media, that in fact the Israelis realize that to protest, to change the system, they're going to be slaughtered. That they're going to be slaughtered. So the Israelis realize this is not going to pave the way to democracy tomorrow. This is going to lead to mass slaughter. Already we had thousands of people killed back in January, and it seems like the Israelis are more than happy to, keep the burning of the system through the corpses of Iranians, and that's a very dangerous thing. Now, the system leading to some form of a failed state. And that's, again, hugely important because that will have a spillover to the region and beyond. And one of the things that Europeans who are quite far from Iran keep warning about is yet another wave of immigration. So those who continue to speak about victories of of Americans and Israelis in Iran, those who, as if they're, inventing something new that the Israelis and the Americans outgun the Iranians. Well, we know that. We knew that for decades. Certainly we knew that from June 2025, when Israel destroyed the Iranian defenses militarily. This is banal, right? This is fait accompli. The question is what next?
Okay.
That's what's important.
Now, let's just shift focus briefly to the United States, because this is an Israeli and a United States operation, and we have this resignation of the National Counterterrorism Center head, who's actually a wholehearted MAGA guy, the whole strategy.
Well, it seems slowly but surely MAGA is imploding, right? I mean, except if you accept the claim by Trump that MAGA is me. I am MAGA and MAGA is me, right? If you actually accept that MAGA is what some of MAGA spokespersons say, that MAGA at the end of the day is America first, then this guy is at the heart of America first, right? And what his argument is, it's not Israel first, folks. It's America first. And we, 2 oceans away from Iran, we have not been threatened by Iran. And much of the fake news about Iran and Iraq nuclear capacity and capability of building a bomb in 1 week, building a bomb in 1 month, building 30 bombs in 1 year, that's more, in his opinion, I think in my opinion as well, is more of an Israeli-type propaganda and manipulation of the Trump administration than anything else. And hence, the United States are saying enough is enough. The Zionist lobby and Netanyahu's eating away at Trump's convictions about the various things, including getting America in a debacle in the Middle East, has to end.
Marwan, as you well know, Gulf nations are being targeted by Iran. We felt them here, haven't we, in Doha, the strikes. From the point of view of the Gulf nations, what do they want, do you think, from the Trump administration? Do they go and finish the job?
Well, what we know is from the very outset, what we know from before the war started, is that most of them, if not all of them, did not want to war. They did not want this war. They warned against the implications of this war because they knew that it's going to also touch them. And have be bombed the way they're being bombed by Iran. And I think, we as journalists, as intellectuals, as observers, we can hold 2 contradictory ideas at the same time, right? Cognitive dissonance, right? The Gulf states are victim of Iranian bombardment as Iran tried to fend it's against this imperial onslaught by the United States and Israel. This is the dilemma that is in this area. Why should they accept to be attacked? And it's the same thing. Iran says, I accept to be attacked, and hence everyone else is going to fall in trouble. So we have this dilemma that doesn't have a solution, except the end of the war.
Speaking to us from here in Doha. Thank you. Well, now, several explosions have rocked Iraq's Baghdad near the US Embassy. The building was reportedly the target of drone strikes on Tuesday On Monday, a drone strike hit a prominent hotel near the embassy in Baghdad. Green zone. Asad Beg joins us live now from Baghdad.
Well, there's definitely been a sharp escalation in drone and aerial activity across the country, including here in the capital, Baghdad. Now, in the capital, Baghdad's green zone, where the U.S. embassy is located, there's been it's come under a repeated drone attack. Now, tonight we understand 2 drone system. The U.S. system stands for rockets, artillery, and mortars, has been very active, mainly trying to intercept drones, as well as the Iraqi forces trying to neutralize any threats. Now, there have been Dura, shrapnel fell on a university building, damaging windows and infrastructure there, although there's been no reports of injuries. There were reports of it falling elsewhere and causing fires, but the authorities here are encouraging people. But it has been a very, very active evening, and it is a definite escalation over the last few days. As you mentioned, the embassy was targeted, but it's not just restricted to Baghdad.
I said, what other attacks have been happening across the country?
Well, in the semi-autonomous Kurdish region in North Iraq, Erbil, one of the Iranian Kurdish opposition groups, we understand 2 drones struck their headquarters in Koya. Now, Kurdish groups, especially since Donald Trump initially said that he wanted them to mount a ground operation into Iran, but that support never materialized. He seemed to backtrack on that, but that hasn't seen a let-up of these groups being targeted. Elsewhere in Iraq, in Nivana, in north of Baghdad, in the Mosul area, a drone fell in some agricultural area, again causing no injuries. In Anbar province, we understand that there were US airstrikes that hit a formation from there, but also in Babil, south of Baghdad, we understand some debris has from falling drones and aerial objects has blocked main roads. So this is kind of spreading. This regional conflict is definitely spreading here in Iraq. But alarming for authorities here in Baghdad is that some of these drones are being launched from inside the city. And although the CRAM, the anti-aircraft system, is...
All right, that's a picture from Baghdad. Asad Beg reporting there. Thank you. Well, Israeli forces are continuing to strike southern Lebanon. Have a look at this, the aftermath of an attack on Arab al-Jal, which is a village near the coastal town of Sidon. The area is home to roughly 500,000 people. It's endured Israeli bombardment for more than 2 weeks to residents of southern Lebanon. The Lebanese government says more than 1 million people have been displaced. About 300,000 of them are children. That's according to the United Nations Children's Fund. UNICEF says more than 100 miners have been killed, more than 300 wounded across Lebanon since March the 2nd. And Syrian authorities say about 80,000 civilians from Lebanon have crossed into Syria. Zena Hodder has this report now from South Lebanon.
There's been another side really fighting for control of territory. We are in the eastern sector of southern Lebanon. What you see, this is the village of control of days of fierce fighting in this area. The Israeli military has been targeting supply lines. It does not want Hezbollah to bring in weapons and fighters to areas closer to the border, as the Israeli military is considered to be an area where Hezbollah has strong influence. There have been repeated Israeli strikes targeting that town, which is believed sector, and Hezbollah is trying to repel those advances. Hezbollah saying that it is targeting Israeli troops inside Lebanese territory while firing. So Hezbollah trying to prevent the Israeli military from taking ground, and the Israeli military, advancing under the cover of heavy air power. Israeli along the border, but it is here where the balance of power will be determined. Zana Khudr, Al Jazeera, South Lebanon.
Well, the World Food Programme, the UN body says this will be caused by a rise in food, oil and shipping costs due to the conflict. If this occurs, those facing acute hunger would rise significantly from the current and spread quickly to the region and cause mass displacement in Lebanon and Iran. Well, the Pentagon is sending more warships and troops to the Middle East. That's according to US media reports. The amphibious assault ship, the USS Tripoli, enforce US troops already in the Middle East. The build-up follows a request from US Central Command, which oversees American military operations in the region. The head of the International Maritime Organization says that naval escorts through the Strait of Hormuz will not 100% guarantee the safety of ships attempting to transit the critical waterway. Assistance was not a long-term or sustainable solution to open up the strait. The IMO chief adds it reduces the risk, but the risk is still there. The merchant ships and seafarers can be affected. He says that ships are collateral damage of a conflict when the root causes have nothing to do with shipping. The US-Israel war on Iran and Tehran's retaliation continues to send ripples through global oil markets and the wider economy. Al Jazeera's Jonah Hull looks at the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz, a waterway in which about 20%
halted maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital waterway that handles about 20% of the world's crude oil and liquefied natural gas. More than 89% of the oil that passes through the strait is destined for Asia. China imports the bulk of that at close to 38%. In contrast, the 5% of India's liquid petroleum gas travels through Hormuz, and Iran has so far allowed some Indian vessels to pass through the strait. About 20% of the global liquefied natural gas export this crucial commodity. In 2022, Europe switched to LNG to reduce reliance on Russian supplies, and before the start of the Iran war, 10 to 15% of its supply was going through the Strait of Hormuz, further exposing Europe's energy vulnerability.
Secretary. And he spoke to my colleague Batibo and said the Trump administration has a plan to mitigate the economic fallout from the Iran war.
We're certainly experiencing some short-term impact. Its oil production as well as its geography on the Strait of Hormuz to disrupt the global flow of energy and other goods. But look, the president has been very clear-eyed about this since day one. He's recognized since day one that this was a possibility, and the administration has accordingly been working on a plan, laid out since day one to mitigate these short-term impacts. That's why you're seeing the Development Finance Corporation step up to provide political risk insurance to ensure that cargo ships can again start flowing through the Gulf again. Why you've seen the U.S. Navy offer to step up and, if needed, provide military escorts to ship supply chains where there may be gaps as a result of this disruption. So the fundamentals of the American economy remain strong. We're taking these short-term actions. And look, fundamentally here, we're very confident that we're going to see military resolution here along the 4 to 6 week timeline that the President Trump has laid out. We've seen astonishing progress here by American and allied forces against the Iranian terror regime. We've seen drone strikes, for instance, decline by 90 to 95%. So we're very confident that we'll very quickly get past these short-term disruptions and get back to business bigger and better than ever before.
But if oil and food prices increase and affect U.S. consumers?
The president has a lot of tools in his tool belt to deal with these disruptions, and we're seeing the administration take a very robust and very nimble and very multifaceted approach to deal with these issues. You brought up food prices, for instance, and the flow of fertilizer inputs. The administration is working very closely with our new partners in Venezuela, as well as with Morocco, to shore up production of certain fertilizer inputs to make sure that our supply chains are resilient and we can get our agriculture sector what it needs to for a successful harvest season. So we're working with all of our partners, with every part of our economy, with every government agency to shore up things both in the short, the medium, and the long term for America and the global economic stability.
You're watching out. The remote of our top has been killed in a strike. Iranian state media have released a statement from Laranjani's social media on Tuesday, but have not confirmed his death. The Iranian president has confirmed the death of Gholam Reza Soleimani, the commander of Iran's internal security unit. Israel had earlier announced that he had been assassinated. The center has resigned over the war with Iran. In a resignation letter posted on X, Joe Kent accused Israel of dragging Washington into the war, saying Iran didn't pose an imminent threat to the United States. It is the first high-profile resignation from the Trump administration since the Iran war began. But Iran's military power is often described as opaque and complex, but behind that complexity lies is a deliberate design. The nation operates parallel armies, multiple intelligence services, and layered military and security institutions operate, and why they're structured just as they are.
Iran does not rely on a single military chain of command. It's security of all armed forces. Below that authority are two parallel militaries. The Artesh, Iran's regular army, is responsible for territorial defense, borders, airspace, and conventional warfare. Alongside it, there's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, known as the IRGC, and its role goes beyond defense. Given its ideological structure, it's responsible for protecting the revolution politically and militarily. Within the IRGC, the Aerospace Force controls Iran's missile and drone arsenal. This forms the backbone of Iran's deterrence strategy against Israel and the United States. Iran's application here is a safeguard against coups, internal threats, and sudden collapse. Inside the IRGC sits the Basij, a mass mobilization force used for internal security, crisis response, and ideological enforcement. Iran also maintains parallel intelligence services, while the two main branches remain the Ministry of Intelligence that follows the government and the IRGC intelligence unit. There are around 16 services that operate under the Council for Intelligence Coordination. Beyond its borders, Iran projects influence through a specialized force. The IRGC's Quds Force manages Iran's regional network. It operates with tactical flexibility, but within limits set in Tehran. Military command is all Al-Anbiya unit coordinates joint military operations during wartime and national emergencies, while the Muhammad Rasulullah bloc is responsible for defending Tehran and managing internal emergencies. Both the IRGC and the army maintain their own joint staffs. They coordinate. Above the battlefield sits the political security layer, the Supreme National Security Council, which brings together senior military commanders, intelligence chiefs, and political leaders to align national security policy. It coordinates strategy, but it does not replace military command. This system may appear complicated and fragmented, but this is done on purpose, and it's central to how Iran manages power. Even after the killing of senior IRGC commanders and joint staff figures, transitions have been orderly. Iran's military structure apt to faster and more complex changes. Ali Hashim, Al Jazeera.
Well, joining me again through Decoding Iran's Foreign Policy, a new book. Ross, good to see you again. So first up, what do you think these two assassinations that of the security chief Ali Laranjani, not yet confirmed by the Iranians, and also the Basij head?
Obviously, Nick, very, very consequential, both in terms of the internal structure of the Iranian government and the direction of Iran's foreign policy. If we certainly cannot predict either where the regime goes from here in terms of regenerating its leadership, and we certainly cannot predict what direction, what it means. A couple things we do know, I believe, Nick. One is that the next generation of leaders likely to be harder edged than the current crop of leaders that have just been assassinated. Why? Because this crop of leaders, Ali Khamenei, crucible of a major 8-year war, an 8-year war, the Iran-Iraq war. And so they developed their chops within the context of a brutal war and developed their diplomatic skills, their notion of risk, their ability to manage risk within that conflict. The next generation of leaders that are going to come up to replace Ali Laranjani, if in fact they're going to be shaped by this conflict more than likely. And this is even though it's only a couple of weeks in, this is a consequential conflict. What it means in terms of possible direction, will there be diplomatic off-ramps? Will the regime move closer to China and Russia, even if that's a possibility? Will it move towards the of this new crop of leaders, like the Iran-Iraq war, shaped the calculus of the previous leader?
Now, the Israelis are trying to negate that possibility, aren't they, to prevent another hardline leadership falling into place. And they say that these assassinations open the door to regime change. Is that possible?
It's possible. I mean, anything is possible, Nick. But I think this regime collapsing, Saddam Hussein collapsing, the Soviet Union collapsing, and their own, the pre-revolutionary government of the Shah collapsing. So they built their institutions and the complexity of these institutions and their system to be, but the notion that this regime will somehow is getting closer to collapse, it could be. But the worrisome thing, Nick, about what the Israelis are saying is that if the regime collapses, then that's the opportunity for the Iranian people, 3 million people. The notion that somehow without an organized opposition, that the people can sort of just march in and take over is fanciful.
So what you're saying is that regime change does not necessarily mean that everything is settled, that everything's at peace, and probably quite the contrary.
Regime adaptation could, certain things will be settled. Regime change means nothing is settled.
Mm-hmm. Can we quantify the numbers of people who do vehemently oppose the regime, the Iranian regime?
Well, it's hard to know which. I mean, but we know that somewhere between 10 and 15% are ardent supporters, vehemently opposed to the regime and are willing to take to the streets, and which are just opposed to the regime and are just going to wait out history. But we see quite large numbers. We saw quite large numbers in January coming to the streets, but we're not talking about enough people yet coming to the streets to actually lead to regime change. That could happen over time, but it's unlikely to happen.
Being assaulted from both Iran and the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing you can say about the Iranians is that they are incredibly nationalistic. And in the next crop of leaders are likely to be coming out of the Islamic Republic, yes, but they will be nationalistic. And the notion that somehow they will take up arms to support the United States and Israel, which has caused civilian casualties, caused injury to Iran's infrastructure, the notion that somehow that's going to be an opportunity for them to take over is just...
To form can actually coordinate any kind of assault on the leadership in any kind of way, because given the assault that's happening on the Iranian people, the lack of internet and so forth.
Right, and you're not going to kill all the leaders. I mean, they will, and then you have the likelihood of a civil war. So the notion that somehow you can make a transition from where we are today to a better future for the Iranian people, which ultimately matters, and for the region we're in right now, and we just don't have the makings of that trend. Most of the organized opposition, Nick, are in the diaspora. They're not inside Iran.
What about future relations with the Gulf region? Under attack from Iran, how is that going to be resolved?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and we don't know. I mean, I think that the Iranians expand the war because they believe they need to do that to create deterrence and to put pressure on Donald Trump. I think they're thinking, and we have not talked to Iranian officials in the last couple of weeks, but I think their thinking is that at the end of the war, they'll be able to repair those relations. Now, will the Gulf Arab states ever trust the Iranians? Maybe not. As disruptive to the regional order as they see the Iranians. And this is a neighborhood, and the Americans and Israel are not in this immediate vicinity. So I think to some degree the Iranians are calculating they'll be able to repair these relations at some point in time.
Back to board, ground troops will be made available when they arrive over the next, 10 days, 2 weeks or so?
Yeah.
In what capacity could they act? And given the decimation of the Iranian defenses, to what effect?
Done to Iran's infrastructure has come from the air, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
So you enter a ground component. And the fact that Iran's air defenses and perhaps some of their missile capabilities have been opposition. We don't know to what we do know is that the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, and I think even the Artesh, the military, the conventional military, they have been distributed throughout the country, expecting this kind of a conflict. So my hunch is that even though the Iranians may be defenseless from the air, they may not be as defenseless if there's boots on the ground from the United States. We don't know that, but that's something we need to watch. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks a lot. Ukraine's president, the focus will remain on Kyiv's war efforts against Russia, even as the conflict in Iran unfolds. Keir Starmer and President Volodymyr Zelensky, they've been discussing security partnerships at 10 Downing Street. They have agreed to collaborate on defense strategies to tackle drone attacks. Ukraine, Zelensky addressed members of the British Parliament. He says that Ukrainian teams are in several Gulf countries to assist with fighting off Iranian drone strikes.
There are 200 who are ready to deploy. These are military experts who know how to help, how to defend against Shahid drones. Our teams are already in the Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and on the way to Kuwait. We are working with several other countries against its neighbors to succeed.
Electricity is gradually being restored to hospitals and to some of Cuba's 11 million residents following the country's third blackout within 4 months. Large parts of the island are without power as the aging national electricity grid collapsed again. The US has imposed an energy blockade after Donald Trump warned of tariffs on, with Trump saying in the last few hours that Cuba right now is in very bad shape.
We are two older people, both in our 70s or older, and she's also sick. Our food has spoiled. I'm boiling 3 pieces of chicken to try and save something to eat because the situation is really bad.
I have to have surgery on my jaw. I fell because the lights went out.
To Nigeria, where dozens of people are feared dead and many more injured in a series of blasts in the northeastern city on Monday. It's the latest in a string of attacks in Borno State carried out by the armed groups Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province known as ISWAP. Ahmed Idris has more on the story.
In a week that saw the killings of dozens of security forces and local militia, civilians in Nigeria's north the attackers to inflict as much harm as they can.
From what I personally saw with my own eyes, there were at least 10. There were many dead, and the number of people was.
We were just sitting there when we suddenly heard a loud explosion. Everyone immediately started running in fear. Later we learned that the other explosion near the post office was also. The police say 21 people were killed, more than 100 were injured in the attack. Done. In the past 2 weeks, they have launched senior officers. The presence of American troops in Nigeria has failed to stop the attack. May have been insulated from attacks. Officials have called for calm and vigilance, but the latest violence in the region, a city that is slowly rebuilding from 16 years of violence. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Abuja.
Many of them are patients at a drug treatment center. Pakistan says the statement is false and misleading, saying it precisely targeted military installations. It is the latest escalation in a growing conflict between the two countries after a fragile ceasefire broke down in February. Robin Bride has this report now.
The aftermath of a devastating attack on a medical facility in the Afghan capital, Kabul, part of the ongoing conflict with neighboring Pakistan. Dormitories housing hundreds of patients undergoing drug addiction treatment were destroyed in the explosions and subsequent fires. Relatives of those being treated have been anxiously waiting for news of loved ones. Bombs were dropped just after evening prayers on Monday.
I found out that this area was bombed in the airstrike last night. I can neither find my nephew alive nor his dead body.
Footage released by Pakistan of Nangarhar. Islamabad has denied Afghanistan's claim it hit a civilian facility and says secondary explosions are evidence of ammunition under the rubble. Scores of survivors are now being treated in hospitals.
In the second explosion, I got hit by shrapnel without hands and arms.
Patients who were already under care now being treated for physical injuries.
I was in today.
This strike marks another escalation of the conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan that had already intensified in recent months. Rob McBride, Al
Near Jalalabad and Kabul. Al Jazeera's Kamal Haider has more from Islamabad.
Pakistani security forces say that they were responding to unprovoked fire on the Pak-Afghan border by Afghan Taliban forces, after which they conducted Jalalabad, the other in Kabul. Now, the Pakistani fighters were involved in what they say were infrastructure, also weapon storage areas. Now, the Afghan Taliban, of course, on the other hand, are saying that what was hit was also, and that there were heavy casualties. Pakistan, on the other hand, has denied that, saying that they do not strike civilian targets, that there's a lot of tension in the area. Now, the two sides have been exchanging fire across the border since the end of February, after Pakistan accused Afghanistan of not containing. On the other hand, had warned that they would go for reprisal attacks, after which air raids were carried out. The Afghans then retaliated end of February, and that has now blown into a full-blown war between the two countries. Kamal Haider.
Patients are waiting for medical treatment they can't get at home. With border crossings largely closed, the World Health Organization says at least 18,000 people urgently need medical evacuation. Among them are Amna and Ahmed, two patients whose lives now depend on whether they can leave Gaza in time. In Kudari.
Day after day, Amna waits for a crossing that may never open. In 2023, she was injured in both legs. Since then, she has been waiting for Israeli permission to leave. Amna is diabetic, and with every passing day, the risk grows that doctors may have to amputate her leg.
Can walk again. Every time I apply, either the crossing closes or something happens that stops me from leaving.
Amna's dream is simple: to stand on her own feet again, to leave the crutches behind. But with Gaza's collapsing, does not exist here, and Amna is not the only one waiting for a chance to leave. 33-year-old Ahmed is also hoping for medical. Ahmed's condition continues to deteriorate as Gaza's health system struggles to give him the treatment he needs.
If I can, they did with the first one. I'm terrified of losing my other leg, and the treatment I need simply does not exist in Gaza.
And the US launched their attacks on Iran. But according to the World Health Organization, at least 18,000 people in Gaza urgently need imposed on Gaza by Israel are risking the lives of thousands here. For many patients, their basic right of medical treatment and freedom of movement Gaza, Palestine.
Now then, the Palestinian Authority is facing a deep financial crisis that could affect its ability to pay salaries in March. With the conflict in the Middle East, many warn that the Palestinian economy could take an additional hit. Nida Ibrahim explains the reasons behind this financial crisis.
The Palestinian Authority has been in debt for years. Now officials are warning this is not a financial crisis, but an existential threat.
Theft of our funds by Israel. This is the 10th month in a row that we've not received a single penny of our money held by Israel.
Was barely able to scrape together enough for 60% of public sector workers' salaries in February. In March, even this may be impossible. Classrooms across the occupied as a stopgap measure, and teachers are among the worst affected, but so are many other sectors. The PA employs 172,000 people, and because the market depends on these salaries, a major part of this crisis comes down to one thing: money that Israel collects on behalf of the Palestinians and refuses to hand over. Let me explain. Because of Israel's military occupation, the Palestinian Authority, called the Paris Protocol, Israel became the tax collector on its behalf. How does that work? Goods come through Israeli ports or Israeli-controlled crossings, and Israeli authorities collect customs and duties. The deal is simple. Israel deducts its money, makes up around 60% of the PA's revenues. It's vital for its survival, vital for the economy itself. But since 2019, Israel has been freezing or subtracting amounts from these transfers. To date, it's withheld $4.5 billion, and the excuses vary. The main one, the PA allocates money to families of Palestinians imprisoned or killed after attacks against Israelis. And for its part, the PA has caved to international pressure and reduced such payments, leaving many families in limbo. But the financial pressure say the cash crunch is a sign of a bigger problem. They fear Israel is working to dismantle the PA, or in their opinion, worse, replace it with a technocratic committee similar to the one recently established in Gaza. 30 years ago, the Palestinian Authority was created as a foundation towards a state, towards sovereignty, independence. The fear now is that this ambition is being buried. In the end, it's an authority collapsing in slow motion, and the crumbling economy is just one aspect of it.
Just going to take a very quick break, but at the top of the hour, we'll discuss the killing of Iran's commander of the besieged forces in the reported assassination of Ali Larijani. Stay with us for that.
The conflict is arising because of Israel's insistence on striking oil facilities inside Iran.
This is one of the oil facilities of the country that has been targeted.
You can see the puff of cloud. Once those interceptors take out those missiles and rockets and drones.
Hezbollah rockets have reached this far into Israeli territory, and Israel consider this a serious escalation.
Lebanon's government is struggling to meet the demand for emergency shelter. This stadium is being converted into a mini tent city.
Stay with Al Jazeera for the latest developments.
I'm Foli Bakibo, Center. I've always wanted to be a journalist because I'm a very inquisitive person. And a pivotal moment was when I did an internship, a show that sought to reunite families separated by conflict in Sierra Leone and Liberia. That's when I realized that we as journalists could make a difference in people's lives. And here at Al Jazeera, We try to make a difference. We make sure their stories are told and their voices are heard.
You are watching Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the US in Israeli attacks on Iran. I'm Nick Clark. Coming up, Iran confirmed of Security Chief Ali Larijani. Iran launches more strikes on central Israel and carries out further attacks across the Gulf region. Also ahead, the top US counterterrorism official resigns, accusing Israel of dragging Washington into war. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the violence has spread across the Gulf region and destabilizing the global economy. Israel now says it's killed 2 more senior members of Ali Larijani. There's been no comment yet from Iran on his status. Since the war began, Larijani has been a central figure in the leadership structure, second only to the supreme leader. Now, the second is Ghulam Reza Soleimani, the commander of the Internal Security Force, which is known as the Besieged. His assassination has been confirmed by the Iranian president. Israel's prime minister says the killings will
in the hope of giving the Iranian people an opportunity to remove it. This will not happen all at once. It will not happen easily, but if we persist, we will give them the opportunity to take their fate into their own hands.
US President Donald Trump has welcomed the strike, saying,
I guess one of the top person was, they say, a lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing, the man that was responsible for the killing of 32,000 people over the last 2 weeks. He was in charge of the killing of protesters. It's an for that was also killed yesterday.
We've got correspondents watching developments for us from Baghdad, from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, from Washington, D.C. reporting the confirmation of Soleimani's death, but still no confirmation on the killing of Larijani, right?
Absolutely no confirmation yet. Since it could be because till the moment they were not able to recover his body. It could be because of political measures or security measures. So there are several reasons why we're not hearing yet. The last time when the supreme leader was assassinated, the second day till they announced. So we will be waiting. However, Al Jazeera's exclusive interview with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi marked the first official reaction to this assassination. Foreign Minister Araghchi said that while he doesn't really know what happened to Mr. Larijani, he doesn't know the fate of Mr. Larijani, he heard the news, but one person at the end is not going to shake the system. He said that this is an institutional system, and even the Supreme Leader, who was maybe the most important person in the establishment when he was killed, the system continued normally. So now we will be waiting to see how the Iranian state is going to deal with this assassination first. Second, who is going to be the replacement. We know very well that Ali Larijani was one of those who were balancing politics here in Iran. He was seen as one of those rational players within the Iranian political system. Who is going to be his replacement, especially that Ali Larijani is the representative of the leader alongside with Saad, representative of the supreme leader, till the new supreme leader appoints his representatives is Saeed Jalil. So he will be taking over the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council.
Okay, let's get the view from Washington, D.C. John Holman standing by for us there. And hi there, John. Larijani is progressing overall.
Yeah, Trump's just talked about it. I think we ran the soundbite from him there, saying that he believes that a top man had got killed, but not a lot more from the administration from that, perhaps waiting for confirmation as well. What President Trump was more keen to speak about, which has been his bugbear for the last couple of days, is the fact that a lot of NATO countries haven't joined this for oil vessels getting through there. He's talked again about Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, again saying that it was a big mistake that he hadn't supported him. That seems a particular sort of wounded thing. He described the United Kingdom. He said, we thought it was the Rolls-Royce of allies, but now he's obviously feeling disappointed about that. He's also looking forward to the visit to Beijing, his visit to China to speak with 5 or 6 weeks. It was meant to happen sooner than that. Originally in interviews, he'd said that whether that was delayed or not had to bear on whether China was actually going to help with securing access to the Strait of Hormuz, which was always a slightly strange position because even Chinese flagships are getting through. That was something that the US Secretary of the Treasury said late last week. So it was unlikely that China was going to get involved with that. Now President Trump has sort of rode that back slightly and said it's not about that. It's more about logistical things, and annoyed, I think, with some partners from NATO and thinking about his upcoming trip.
Back to Ali in Tehran. And Ali, the killing of Soleimani, the besieged commander, is that likely to change anything in how security is conducted on the ground?
Well, given the fact that the Iranian, the idea of assassinations, and they've gone through this. They've seen most of their military commanders killed in the last, in the 2025 war, and in this war, military commanders were killed. The supreme leader himself was killed. The secretary of the supreme had their own measures. So probably with respect to day-to-day business, this is not going to change anything. Yes, it could have a symbolic reaction. It could have a symbolic weight on how they think here, but it's not going to change how the plans are on the ground. Possible protests, and today, for example, the situation here in Tehran saw a lot of checkpoints, saw also at the same time a lot of precautions by security personnel.
Ali Hashim in Tehran, thanks for that. So now the US director of the National Counterterrorism Center has resigned, saying he cannot in good conscience support the Trump administration's war in Iran. Joseph Kent's his name. He posted his resignation on social media, saying that Iran poses no imminent threat to the United States. He adds, lobby. Kent was confirmed to the role by the Senate last July. Now, speaking at a press briefing alongside the Irish Prime Minister, Donald Trump criticized Joe Kent's resignation.
Well, I read his statement. I always thought it was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it.
So John Holman in Washington, D.C., Trump kind of brushing off the resignation.
Well, I think this is the first high-profile official that has resigned because of the conflict in Iran. So it's important for that reason. I think also this was a real President Trump loyalist. He was picked by Trump to actually head up that section as director of the National Counterterrorism Center. In operative terms as well, that center oversaw US intelligence on terrorism threats, so it was an important role. This is someone that was an ex-special force loyal to him. So I think we have to wait and see who takes on that post